My name is Joy Loving. I'm a retired resident of Rockingham County, Virginia. In concert with the Virginia Cooperative Extension Service, I'm offering this presentation to tell people about my experience with 3 solar co-ops in the central part of the Shenandoah Valley that I've been involved with since the spring of 2014. Most of us recognize that electricity has not been with us forever, and certainly not been available to everyone. About 100 years ago, it came to the cities, but in the 1930s, the Rural Electrification Act brought it to those of us who live in the country. In addition to giving us the electricity, that program brought us the concept of electric co-ops. These live on today in the form of municipal and rural electric cooperatives. Of course, we also have our large utilities that produce probably the bulk of electricity that we all use within the Commonwealth. In addition to the power of the electricity, no pun intended, that program, or those programs in the 1930s, taught us a bit about working together to accomplish something that was in the community interest. This picture illustrates the success of that particular community's effort to bring electricity to their part of the world. As a result of that program and advancements in technology, we developed utility business models, utility practices, utility models. In the case of Virginia, we have regulated monopolies in addition to the municipal and other rural electric cooperatives. The availability of electricity has brought with it over the years many requirements for more and more electricity. So our needs have changed, they've grown, the uses to which we've put electricity have dramatically changed. But our power sources and our infrastructure have not changed so much, particularly in terms of the sources of electricity or energy that we use to produce electricity. That picture, though, is changing. Part of the reason it's changing is because in 2009, the Department of Energy assisted a community in Portland, Oregon, to put up solar panels on many residences at the same time. The Department of Energy coined the term Solarize at the time of that program. It was extremely successful and spread quickly in Oregon. But it didn't stop in Oregon. As this slide illustrates, many of our states have solar cooperative type programs. Virginia, while it may be behind in many ways in terms of the use of solar, has certainly been demonstrating the interests of its communities in expanding the availability of solar power. The list of cooperatives is around 30. And this just represents what I've been able to identify. Most of these are grassroots programs, and I'm not sure that I'm even aware of all of the ones that have happened. It's interesting to note that, to my knowledge, all of these that are listed here began in early 2014. Many of us may have heard about the idea of a co-op from a variety of perspectives. A solar co-op is a bit different in that it's not a legal entity. It is a collection of people who have decided collectively that they want to go solar together, although their particular solar installations would be individual. The members become as involved in the co-op as they choose to be. They decide that they need and they find a sponsor and a facilitator. We'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. Once in the co-op, which generally means registering on a website to express interest, one receives an initial site assessment. One then receives an individualized proposal from the selected installer and can make a decision at that point as to whether they wish to sign a contract. Many people in co-ops, and I am one of them, decided to do some advocacy work around the use of solar. Certainly, I have tried to share the success of my own installation in 2012 by connecting to others to make them aware. So solar co-ops have a multiple benefit. Not only do they increase the availability of solar in an area, they increase the knowledge of the local residents about solar's opportunities, feasibility, and benefits. We will not go through this entire chart in detail, but what you can see from this slide is that the solar co-op process is organized, sequential, and not terribly complex, notwithstanding what might appear to be the complexity of this slide. In essence, someone who wants to join a co-op gets information about it. You can have information sessions open to the public if you are a co-op organizer, but attending such a session is rarely, if ever, a requirement of a solar co-op. You join it as simply as registering on a website. You immediately get a GPS satellite roof review to find out if your roof or your site, not everyone puts solar on their roof, will work. Things that are considered there are, do you have lots of shading on your roof? What's the positioning of your roof or site vis-a-vis the south? In general, it's, are you a good fit? And no solar installer, and certainly no co-op, wants a person to go solar when they cannot optimize the benefits of doing so. Perhaps one of the strongest and most beneficial features of the solar co-op process is the fact that finding an installer is done as a group through a competitive bid process. The co-op members decide what criteria they are interested in following and employing in making a decision about the installer. Co-op members review the bids received and make a decision. Every member of the co-op who signs up before the deadline, because this is a time-limited process, is able to get a fully individualized proposal to fit their particular circumstances. If they choose to do so, they sign a contract directly with the installer. Once the install happens for them and for other members of the co-op, in many instances, co-op members gather together and celebrate. That's, of course, optional. So you may wonder, why is it they're happening? I've listed here what I have identified through talking to other people and from my own personal experience, reasons why people choose to go solar. Of course, they first have to understand what solar can do and what it can't do. But sometimes that inquiry is driven by the cost of their electricity, which they may believe is too high, or they simply are trying to find ways to economize. The cost of solar has come down. Solar is not new. It's been around for a long time. Dramatic decreases in pricing have occurred, especially in the 2000s. Many people choose solar because they are interested in exercising their freedom to choose the energy source for their electricity. Others are concerned about the security of centralized distribution systems, which many utilities employ. Diversified or distributed generation arguably lowers the risk of problems in the energy security arena. There are some people who believe going solar is a part of their contract or commitment to creation care, to taking care of the earth that they believe the Creator has provided us. And last but not least, many people do it to lower their carbon footprint, help reduce the CO2 in the environment. Your reasons for going solar are immaterial or irrelevant to your joining the co-op. The co-op will not ask you why you're participating, other than if it comes up in conversation. And of course, you can have more than one reason for doing so. I'd like to mention a few benefits of solar. Perhaps the one that you may have heard about is the federal tax credit. Many states offer tax or other incentives for going solar. Virginia is currently not one of those, but the federal government will, through the end of 2016, offer a 30% tax credit. Many utilities, including the ones in Virginia, offer net metering programs. Net metering programs allow you to stay on the grid, produce solar, use whatever you need as it is being produced, and then send the rest to the grid, drawing on your credits later when the sun isn't shining, or you're in the part of the year when the sun is not allowing your system to produce as much as it does in the summer. In some states, unfortunately not Virginia, there are such things as solar renewable energy credits. This is kind of a market-driven process in which one gets checks for the fact that we produced energy using renewable energy. In the case of Virginia, most of us who have gone solar sell our credits on the Pennsylvania market, as Virginia does not have one. And finally, I want to mention that through the Department of Agriculture's program called REAP, assistance is available for farmers and small businesses in rural areas. Most times when I am talking to people about solar, the first question is, how much will it cost? And my answer is, it depends. Not very satisfactory in many instances, but truly the solar footprint that you would have at your particular location will determine what the cost is, in addition to factors like the pricing the co-op is able to obtain. And your usage is a big driver there, not of the price that the installer selects, but of what your particular solution will be. But as a consumer who should be educated before you go into something like this, you need to understand that the square footage of your house is not necessarily a driver, nor is the number of solar panels that are installed. The unit price for solar is on a watt basis. Many of us don't even know what our electric bills are in terms of our usage, and we need to learn about that. You become quite focused on your electric bill when you're considering whether or not to go solar. Through the co-op, whoever is the selected installer provides a discounted rate. It's standard in the sense that they do price standard equipment, panels, racking systems, ground-mounted equipment, and so on. What you get is an individualized contract and an individualized installation. You need to keep in mind that solar is not a short-term, it is rather a long-term investment. Perhaps longer term than the installation of a quote-unquote traditional electricity producing system. Solar doesn't have any moving parts. It has at least a 30-year lifespan, and most of the systems are warranted for at least 25 years. Keep in mind that if you qualify, the REAP grant and the federal tax credit can help lower the cost even more than the 30% federal tax credit can by itself. Checking into eligibility if you are a farmer or a small business makes a lot of sense. There are rules and regulations, of course there always are, and you need to be fully cognizant of what those are before you pursue one of those grants. And I think lastly, you need to evaluate the fact that energy prices rarely drop. Rates generally do not decrease. And my information is that using Dominion as one example, it is one utility in the state, there has been a not trivial rate increase in the last 7 years. As I have indicated, small businesses, farms, and homeowners can certainly join the co-op. It's also true that nonprofits, such as churches and educational institutions, can do so. Here's a little information about the 3 co-ops that I've been involved with since the spring of 2014. The first one, Solarize Harrisonburg, resulted in 68 folks going solar. These people live, for the most part, in Harrisonburg and Rockingham County. A few lived in Augusta and a few in Shenandoah counties because they learned about the co-op. Immediately following Solarize Harrisonburg, a group of people in Augusta County, immediately south of Rockingham, decided to establish their own solar co-op. This information is true as of mid-November, but the number of contracts is not yet known because they are happening right now. And finally, we have the one that I'm currently involved with, Massanutten Regional Solar Co-op. Again, mid-November numbers. We have 107 residents signed up. And 98 of those residents have good, that is to say, sun-suitable or solar-suitable sites or residences. The last sign-up date for this co-op is coming up at the end of January 2016. I expect that all installations from Massanutten Regional Solar Co-op and certainly from Solarize Augusta will happen well before the December 31st, 2016 expiration date for the federal tax credit. You may be wondering how these co-ops came to be. So I've shown here the logos for the 3 organizations that were instrumental in making it happen. Community Power Network, which was founded in 2007, came from its founder's interest in helping communities go solar. She founded an organization called Community Power Network. It's based in DC, and the map we saw earlier, or the list rather, of states that have gone solar are in large part attributed to Community Power Network's work in helping communities go solar. Virginia Sun is a sister or affiliate organization to Community Power Network, which also has Sun organizations in Maryland, DC, and West Virginia. The green logo at the bottom is the logo of the Climate Action Alliance of the Valley, an organization based in Harrisonburg, Virginia, dedicated to educating people about the effects of climate change and what they can do to help address it. Solar co-ops just don't happen. There have to be people and organizations willing to do the work to make them successful. Here's what I see as the 5 essential factors. You need a sponsoring organization that has some resources and that those resources can be made available. The sponsoring organization for all 3 of the solar co-ops in the Central Shenandoah Valley is Climate Action Alliance of the Valley. You also need a local organizer, an individual willing to drive the process. The local organizer's work is to perform the outreach and publicity for the co-op. The sign-up period usually lasts 4 to 5 months, which means that the local organizer needs to have enough staying power to get the word out for as long as is necessary. And finally, in terms of organizations, you need a facilitator organization. Someone has to manage the overall process, including things like the website and overseeing the installer, even overseeing the issuance of the request for proposals for the competitive bid process, and helping the co-op reach a decision, and then helping co-op members work with the installer as needed once contracts are signed. These 3 folks or groups of folks need to be able to talk to each other and have good communication channels. And before you launch a co-op, you need to gauge community interest. One way of doing this is simply to hold a community meeting and see what happens. And that's what we did in June of 2014. And at our first investigatory meeting, we had 100 people show up. So we decided there probably was enough interest to move forward with the first of these 3 co-ops. I'd like to tell you a little bit about some of the lessons that I have learned as a leader of 2 of the 3 co-ops and as someone who helped form the Augusta co-op. You truly need a community effort. It's not a one-person job. In many instances, since we are dealing with nonprofit organizations for the most part, you have issues of money, time, and people. You are asking volunteers to devote their time and energy to do things like sit at a farmer's market for 6 hours on a Saturday to tell people about solar. Managing people that don't work for you is not as easy as managing people who do work for you, and that's not always easy. There are times when I felt like I was herding cats and that I needed to constantly follow up. So whoever is your local organizer around outreach and publicity needs not only to have staying power, but needs to be able and willing to do that follow-up and organizational management. You need to understand who it is you're trying to target demographically. Give yourself a brand and work on media, because without media, getting the word out is very difficult. We learned as we went, and we understand that we need to use social media, print media, TV media, and radio media, as well as the normal personal public information meetings and tabling activities. We're learning from the latest co-op that the larger the geographical area is, the trickier it is to get the word out. You have, in many instances, a larger media pool and more people to contact. Communication is largely done by email and phone calls, and not so much with in-person meetings, which makes management of all of the different people a little more challenging. Word of mouth takes you farther in a smaller, close-knit community. We found that to be true in Harrisonburg, because once people decided to go solar or to at least join the co-op, they talked to their neighbors. That's harder to do in more rural and dispersed areas. In-person presentations to small groups may feel like they're more productive than, say, tabling at a public setting, but I've found it's a bit of a mixed bag. The event you're tabling at needs to be set up in such a way that you feel like you can get your message, that whatever is happening at that event, the people who are there and stroll by your display need to be caught by what you're saying and at least favorably disposed to the idea. Having a very strong organizational facilitator from the beginning is very necessary, and you have to be sure and be comfortable with your ability to communicate. In my case, I have worked 3 times with Virginia Sun. They are not the only facilitator in Virginia, but I have found that to be a worthwhile coordination and partnership. Getting the word out about public information sessions is not so easy, but it has to be done. In these days of reduced reliance on print media, I've nonetheless learned that articles in the newspaper are more effective in many ways than online events calendars and flyers. That's not to say that social media might not be a better alternative for your particular demographic. If, for example, you are interested in forming a co-op for banks in a given county or city, or a co-op of churches, or a co-op of small businesses. Depending on the demographics, social media may be a better approach, as might regular speaking presentation opportunities to members of those type of organizations. So keep in mind that a target demographic can be what you want it to be, and it doesn't necessarily mean a city or a town. It can be any group of individuals who have a common interest in going solar. If you happen to be interested in Massanutten Regional Solar Co-op, here are 2 websites, and a couple of email addresses. You don't need to write these down or memorize them. You can Google Massanutten Regional Solar Co-op and you will find not only the website but the Facebook page. solarteam@vasun.org is an email address to get questions answered by Virginia Sun technical folks. The email to the right is mine, and if you have questions about forming a co-op or about anything I have said, you can reach out to me at that email address.